So it probably captured me cursing and swearing. That's great. Saying,
Love that.
love that for me. And it might be a blooper. Nothing makes you feel like a bumbling fool more than this kind of stuff. Welcome to DisabiliTEA, a special edition of the Finding Avalon podcast. I'm Jenna Barnable, a disabled advocate and creator from Atlantic, Canada. And because 1 in 4 Canadians live with disability, chronic illness, and neurodivergence, we need to get comfortable talking about it and taking action together. So settle in as we spill the tea on all things disability. I have Mandy Ford joining me today from Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador. She's an Indigenous writer, artist, and heritage professional from the traditional territory of Nunatu Inuit in southern Labrador. Along with being a wife, dog mom, and busy creator, Mandy's also a disability community ally. She has lived experience supporting her parents who are seniors living in a remote area with limited access to healthcare. So, Mandy, are you ready to spill some disability?
Yes.
Let's go.
So I have the original, the OG Tetley tea, a favorite in our household and my grandparents' household. And I've chosen a mug, a very vintage mug, one like my grandfather would use all the time. So I guess today is just a paying homage to him, the tea and the cup.
Nice. So the tea is Tetley too?
Oh yes, and I have cinnamon flavored honey in it.
Yeah. You don't mess around. That is a beautiful vintage find. It's pristine.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to show you my mug here. It is one from a collection from Saucy Pots Pottery in St. John's, Newfoundland. And these mugs feature cheeky phrases and expressions that celebrate Old English and Old Irish sayings from Newfoundland and Labrador. As anyone from that region would know what a hard case is.
Where I'm from, it would be hard ticket.
Yeah, hard ticket. We also say hard ticket and hard case. Yeah, these are colloquialisms, I guess, from our region. And I'm drinking a tea blend called Strawberry Green, and it's by the World Tea House here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's a locally made blend of sencha green tea, and in it there's dried strawberry, hibiscus, and strawberry extract, a combination that I really love. The World Tea House is an award-winning organic tea maker and cafe in downtown Halifax, and they are a wonderful supporter of the DisabiliTEA series and also a proud episode sponsor today. So thank you, World Tea House. You're going to get this in the mail.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
It's going to come to you to thank you for being a guest on the series.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Sometimes real change starts with a conversation over a hot drink, just like this. So, Mandy, what disability-related topic would you like to spill the tea about?
Well, I guess I'm talking from a perspective of a daughter of a mother who has fibromyalgia. She was diagnosed later in life, in her mid 50s, and we didn't even know what it was. We literally had to leave the hospital and Google it. And all the symptoms, yeah, she had them. It fit the bill. And it was a really emotional time for both of us, because where my mother is living, it's a very remote community. Remote in the sense that I guess not a lot of people visit and leave in and out. It is accessible, but it's still very, very remote. The town itself is around 200 people. It has a clinic, but it's not always guaranteed to have a nurse present. Routinely, for years, people who needed health care beyond like your standard healthcare would have to travel to St. Anthony. So that's a plane ride away or a boat ride away. And when she got this fibromyalgia diagnosis, we really didn't know where to go. From there, she had to come to Happy Valley Goose Bay to get this diagnosis. And that's like a 5-hour drive. And anyone with chronic pain knows that's extremely uncomfortable for days after as well. So basically, we got her down here. She got her diagnosis, and then we were kind of left to fend for ourselves. So I live here in Goose Bay. She lives in St. Louis, 5 hours away, and I don't know how to help. Part of what I try to do is to be an advocate. So whenever she has an issue that we can't get addressed, I try to reach out to people who I think can help, whether that's like a government official or someone from our Indigenous government and even community members. Just recently, my dad got really sick and I had to spend a month in hospital in St. John's with him. Like, normally, my dad is the caregiver for my mother. So, with being gone a whole month, we weren't really sure how that would work. But the community thankfully really pulled through for mom, and people took turns coming to help her. Being from a small community is a bit of a blessing and a curse where you don't have constant care. But then also the community where it's such a tight knit place, everybody helps you whenever they can. But I mean, to this day, like she was diagnosed, I think 3 years ago now, she still doesn't have a pain management plan. So the best that we can do, or the most recent thing we've heard, I guess, from a doctor is continue to take Tylenol for arthritis. And I don't know how many times that I've heard that from people visiting hospitals and clinics. Oh, take some Tylenol. Tylenol is not going to solve that. It might take away pain temporarily, but it doesn't get at the root of anything. And it's not just medication. You need to look at the big picture. You need to look at the way you're living. Like, is your house suitable for your disability? Do you have a shower that you can get into? Or are your steps too steep? Or is your bed too high? Like, there's so many different things that I don't have to think about, but my mom does. And other factors of cost of living, like in a small community like that, food is very expensive. So it's really a struggle, and it's something we have to take on day by day, but I am concerned about the future, um, and where things go from there because I don't think it's sustainable for my parents to live like that. Um, as sad as it is, it's their home, but there's no healthcare.
So many people living in remote and rural regions don't have access to regular care. And also, the further north you go in Labrador, too, when you talked about the grocery cost, I know when I was doing my field work there and working there for different organizations and flying in and out of Labrador, I would see, milk for $25. No greenery, no veg to be seen because, like you said, it was cleared out immediately. And how can people feed themselves nutritiously and consistently, um, if that's a barrier? And then the barrier to care, hearing that your mom doesn't have a pain management plan is a horrible thing to hear, but I'm not surprised because neither do I, and it's been years. Thank you for sharing that because it's gotta be hard. How do you feel, like, as a daughter, and you're not as close by, you're a 5-hour drive, and that's if it's a good weather day. How does that feel when you're so far away from your mom?
It feels really scary. Um, we do have conversations a lot on video chat. So that's a nice part, but it's not like I can reach out and hug her through a video. um, but it is very scary because where I'm 5 hours away, and there's no real consistent healthcare, especially emergency healthcare. So the town has like a clinic and a nurse. It's not always guaranteed to have a nurse, but if there was an emergency, the patient would have to get medevaced to St. Anthony. But of course, all of that also depends on the weather. So if it's a stormy winter day, you're not getting anywhere. And so what happens then? You're stuck and you're gonna continually get worse, if not pass away. Like, I mean, to be real, it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
If the weather is bad and you can't get out, that's
yeah.
what happens. And that's the reality of living in such a small, isolated place. And it's really not fair for people to say, "Well, why don't you move?" Because this is an indigenous community that has had roots there for hundreds of years, and it's not fair to just tell people to just leave. Connection means a lot to people. Their traditional ways means a lot to people, and you can't just expect people to move.
Mhm. It feels very simplistic and reductionist for somebody to just come back with that kind of an answer as if it's that easy. First of all, even financially, physically, the pain and the energy it takes to even move a household, if you could afford to, and if you had no particular strong ties, we're talking about strong cultural ties, strong heritage ties. So even if your family had said, yeah, maybe we will retire and move closer to you or go somewhere else more central, fine. But there's a lot of privilege wrapped up in that to be able to uproot and go from a remote place. And when our loved ones are getting older, at any time, we're just like one injury or one illness away from disability, even when you are quote unquote healthy. But like when your dad got sick, you went into St. John's and not St. Anthony, so that was a much further and much more costly. I guess with medevac, is that covered by, MCP or anything like that in the province?
It is, but I had to fight tooth and nail to get him medevac. I went home for Christmas for a night on December 29th, and the day that I got home, he was really sick and he was not himself. He went to the clinic and the nurse was basically like, "You need to get your dad to an emergency as soon as possible," because they couldn't handle him there. So I transported my dad to Goose Bay. They were running a bunch of blood work. They identified the problem, but I knew it was something bigger than that happening. So I had to push for, I think, 4 days. And he finally got medevac to St. John's. There was no room on the medevac for me. So I had to wait and take a commercial flight in. And then we spent almost an entire month at the Health Science Center.
Mandy,
It was really hard.
when you said, so you were separated then at a time when you want to be right by his side, and then you had to get a commercial flight, which anyone who knows flying in and out of Labrador or anywhere north is extremely expensive. Like, does MCP cover that for you as the companion, or did you have to do that out of pocket?
We did it out of pocket, but I have to say, PAL Airlines was really gracious about it. Like when people have to go on medical and if there's emergencies, they do give a reduced rate. So I was very grateful. My ticket, I think, was cut almost in half. And same thing to come back. It was just really unfortunate that I couldn't get on the medevac with him because I know that would have made him more comfortable too.
So when it's full, is it because there are other patients that need to be
Yeah,
evacuated? Right.
yeah.
And you said that usually the flight pattern is to go to St. Anthony, which for anyone who's watching, that's the northernmost, larger town with a hospital in Newfoundland. So coming from Labrador down to St. Anthony, what made you go into St. John's? Was it that the specific care that was needed was in St. John's?
Yeah, it was basically a do or die situation, and it was so severe that the case could only really be handled in St. John's. Yeah, because there wasn't health providers in St. Anthony that could have taken care of the issue that he had.
Hmm. So when it comes time for like recouping the cost for you to fly commercially. Wonderful for PAL to give you that discount. For the remainder that you did pay, though, is there a way that that can be claimed back under like disability tax credit or at tax time? Or is that just something that a person who lives in a remote region in Labrador will have to pocket and like just take?
I think it really depends on the situation of what's happening. Like if it's an emergency, then it requires a medevac that's covered, and I think it also depends probably on how long the patient has to stay where they are. Because dad was in there a month and by the time he left, he was set up in a good way so that he took a commercial flight back with me. So there was no medevac back, which meant that we paid for both tickets to come back. But it's different in different parts of Labrador. I know it's even more difficult on the North Coast, because at least in the South Coast, where my family is from, there's a road connecting a lot of the communities. But on the North Coast, it's just snowmobile or plane.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're in Nain and something like that happens, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know much about Labrador. It's true. Even Newfoundlanders that I know don't know. I've been very lucky to have been able to do research and to do work there and to visit there. But that was something that was immediately apparent to me as a young person right out of school, flying to Nain, and I worked my way all the way down through the coast. But I remember thinking, well, what happens in emergency? The ocean's frozen there, so we can take the, snowmobile, the skidoo across, or fly, and flying was super expensive. It definitely gave me a whole new appreciation when you're living north or anywhere else remote in Canada. I think it's really important for people to hear stories like yours because you flew to St. John's, worried about your dad, took days to even get him there, and then you didn't know how long it was going to take. Tell me about how that situation developed because you said you were there a whole month,
Yeah.
unexpectedly for a whole month.
I wanted to be there with him to take all that information in. I literally have probably 30 pages filled out in journal because every time we got to talk to somebody, I wrote it all down. I'm like, I want to make sure all of my facts are correct. It's sad that this is what we have to do now, but having it all written down for just to be able to remember, but also to hold people to account if you need to.
Absolutely, because when you're in an emergency situation and you're in a whole new town, a whole new hospital complex, and there's so many people coming from every side and people telling you different things, and that is human, that can happen. But it's so important to note take and to have someone who's your advocate. Like you were the advocate. You're not just a daughter, you're advocating for his rights and for his safety. And that's a lot for you to be understanding complex medical information. So writing that in a notebook, smart and so important, but that's also, I think, stressful and exhausting too. And you did that for a month? Like you were by his side for a month.
Yeah. Um, it was really stressful. I do have a couple of aunts and uncles that live in there. But I mean, they have lives, so nobody would expect them to up and be there that whole time. But they did routinely come in and relieve me for an hour or so. And like, I would leave the room and basically cry in the cafeteria because it was so stressful. And being also the only child on top of all of it, having both senior parents, it's a constant worry of planning and what's next and what am I going to do if this happens? And it's a lot of stress. And I left my life here in Goose Bay, my husband and my two dogs and my job. Thankfully, my job was very understanding. Um, but yeah, it took me away from my life for a full month and I had to seek counseling afterwards because there were moments that were extremely hard for me, like having my dad faint multiple times, and if I wasn't in the room to catch him, we'd probably still be in there.
That's high, like high acute stress. And then it's also traumatic, right? People throw around the word trauma without really understanding that, like that situation you're in 24/7, you barely got a break. What have you been doing to decompress?
Walking in the cold air helps a lot. Also reading and coloring and just, zoning out watching TV with my husband and playing with my dogs, just trying to distract, but distract in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I know you're a writer and a creative person and a poet. Obviously, you were in like survival mode and getting so many things written down in your notebook. Did you have any moments where you were doodling, drawing, or writing some verses, or did that come to you, or was it just like ground zero the whole time?
I did write a poem while I
Wow,
was there. I will read it if you want, actually.
I would love to hear it. So when did you write this one? You're at your
Uh,
dad's bedside?
at my dad's bedside, yeah. He had just fallen asleep. He had a really rough night. Um, and I had got there really early in the morning, and the sun was kind of just coming in through the window, and I was just thinking about, all he had been through. I called it water lines because he had a lot of tubes hooked up to him. He had tubes from his kidneys and it was to remove water. So the poem's called Water Lines. Young and restless in a green plaid robe, bones on display, through worn out blue sheets, interrupted in a fake plastic bed, hope degrading with each passing day. Socks stretched to knees, a stain kept from partridge berries past. Sticky floors beneath tired feet and aching hearts. Lights spill out of the parking lot, and the night holds your hand until morning. Ancestral wishes for better conclusions because God cannot be found here. Foreign water lines are tangled webs of contrition.
That's beautiful.
I read it out loud, and that's the first time I've read it out loud since I wrote it, and I
Really?
right back in that moment of sitting there.
Yeah,
And the version of it in my actual journal where I wrote it is like stained with tears because it's a rough time.
absolutely. No, it's very visceral. This is very special that you shared this here. I really appreciate that. For anyone watching, Mandy's an amazing poet and writer and creative and photographer. She's so creative. But yeah, that feels like a continuation of your first book of poetry. That's a significant piece.
It's the first thing I wrote since the book, so
Yeah?
and I haven't shared it with anybody, so there you go, special for you.
Wow, VIP moment. Exclusive. A
Yeah.
Mandy Ford exclusive right here on Spill the Disability. I'm so happy to have somebody from Labrador on this show to bring these perspectives. And I wanted to ask you before we go, what can people do to take action for disability inclusion?
I would say listen. Listen to disabled voices, share content that talks about the lived realities of disabled people and their allies, and just educate yourself. Like, you know, don't expect people to come to you all the time. Like, you have to reach out to them too and learn in a respectful way, of course. But yeah, share content. I guess also practice empathy. I find that in itself is really missing in so much of life these days. If you see somebody struggling, just approach them in a humble way, you know? Ask them if they need some help. The worst they're going to do is tell you no.
Yeah.
Just be a good human.
Thanks, Mandy, for being an ally like you are, someone who supports loved ones and friends who live with the realities of disability, because we really need vocal community allies like you. And we need to hear more stories like yours. Well, here's to spilling the disability. He knows his
Yes,
name.
Dale.
Look, his little tail wagging. Hi, Raven. Hi, baby. Raven.
Yes, yeah.
I can't take it. I want to kiss his face. Oh, what a good boy. Stay small forever and live for 100 years, Raven.
No. It's the worst thing about dogs that they gotta go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But this part here is the best part.